feminine for men. He said for most men, their inner feminine side is like a little bratty teenager that's whining and bitchy and emotional. And that the idea is to help that young adolescent girl grow up into a Sophia, into a goddess of wisdom. And then for women as well, the Mars helping that Mars to mature. So there's, again, the uniting of the feminine and masculine. Let's go on. Again, this is one of my humorists, so anybody that wants to laugh can laugh. This vignette here, looking for love in all the wrong places, I had my audience try to predict which of the vignettes would be where you would find true love. So if we look at the first one, he's looking under his armpit. The second one, he's looking down his pants. And the third is he's looking into a shoe. Where would you think you would find divine love? Any answers? Anybody want to guess? No? Okay. I think it's the third, where he's looking into the shoe, because that's where you would find your soulmate. Anyway, okay, moving on.
That was a great one, sir.
The next one's disease. And again, I think with this, there's ways that we can word things. If we see, for example, someone that has, let's just say Rahu in the 4th house, or some aspect, harsh aspect onto the sun, and you see the potential for a heart attack or heart problems. And so again, I would often encourage clients when I saw that, and let's just say they were, one client had moon in Scorpio and sun debilitated as well. And I saw that he was going into his sun Mahadasha. So I really encouraged him strongly to go, he was only in his 40s, to go and check out and get a full exam, maybe even do a little extra, in terms of just checking blood pressure, cholesterol, other issues with the, with the heart. And about a year later, he emailed me back, and he had already entered into the sun dasha, I think about 6 months earlier. And sure enough, he had a heart attack. Heart attack or stroke during that sun Mahadasha. So again, I think the way you word things is to, you don't want to cheerlead someone off a cliff, but at the same time, you don't want to engender fear in the client as well. Let's go on to the next. Another cartoon, the doctor is saying to the patient, "No two ways about it, Mr. LeBlanc, you've acquired a moon. Would you like me to try to remove it?" And the patient says, "I don't know, it distracts me while I'm driving, but my wife finds it very romantic." So I always think with these planets, it's almost like they're orbiting around our head. And when we go into a particular dasha, that planet again has a strong impact as well. So maybe that's Venus too, as well as the moon. Okay, let's move on. And again, this is Einstein's chart. So I think we've already talked about it enough, again, with the challenging moon position in his chart. Let's go on to the next. Oh, one thing, I forgot, going back to Einstein's chart, I forgot to mention that this Mercury also being in Pisces and his moon being in Scorpio in Jeshta, which is ruled by Mercury. So he was born in a Mercury Mahadasha. And he was actually labeled as a child dyslexic. So he had this challenge with the Mercury in the mind. And he actually, even one of his teachers said to him something to the effect that you'll never, ever make anything of yourself, And, sure enough, I mean, he went through, a Ketu Mahadasha, following the Mercury period. And it was a very, very difficult dasha for him. And then after that, he went into Venus in his late teenage years. And then the Venus exalted started to present all this great fame and recognition for his work. And of course, the Venus Mahadasha is a 20-year cycle. So he had a very good run then. That's when he, developed the theory of relativity, as I mentioned, with his wife. Was a great, great soul that was involved in that. And even, his seventh house ruler, Jupiter, is in the ninth house in Aquarius, which is a good sign for Jupiter as far as philosophical thought. But again, the Mercury reared its head during his early childhood. And he really actually said he did not want fame. But with 4 planets in the 10th house and Karma Dharma Yoga with Saturn and Jupiter exchanging signs, it was hard for him to hide out fully from fame. Let's move on to the next. Here again, we have Yogananda and his guru, again, Sri Yukteswar. And Yogananda, again, had this battle that's talked about in Autobiography of a Yogi. And again, his guru kind of set him straight on it and gave him a discourse on astrology one day. And there's a beautiful quote by Sri Yukteswar that I love, which goes, a child is born at that moment in time that's in mathematical harmony with that soul's karma. It reflects one's unalterable past, but probable future results, and underline probable, because he said the message blazoned across the heavens at the moment of birth was not meant to emphasize fate, but was to arouse the soul from slumber, or as I like to say, to rouse the soul into action. So again, there's this beautiful story of where Sri Yukteswar tells Yogananda there are particular combinations that were coming into his chart that he would be very ill. And so he recommended a bangle for Yogananda to wear of precious metals. And then he had doing different yoga sadhanas. But sure enough, at the appointed time, he came down with a severe liver illness. And when we look at his chart in a minute, we'll see that he has Jupiter, Mars. Jupiter, I feel, rules liver in his 8th house, aspected by Saturn in opposition. So anyway, the illness came, and his guru, again, I think Yogananda, he said he gave a prediction when Yogananda would pull out of this challenge he was having, a severe pain he was in. And sure enough, he came out of that. And Yogananda said to him, if you weren't doing some of these upayas or remedial measures, then most likely you would have passed away. So Yogananda thought this was great, that how you could, as he said in the title of the chapter, how you can outwit the stars. But as we know, again, sometimes when we see dreed karma or fixed karmas in the chart where it's showing up 3 or 4 ways, again, that pothole may be really in the road, but maybe again, through our free will, we can brake and maybe hit the pothole at 10 or 20 miles an hour rather than 80 miles an hour. Let's go on to the next slide. This is again Yogananda's chart, the Leo rising, and I was mentioning about the liver illness, and this was again Jupiter, even though it's ruling sign of Pisces, so it's a beautiful Jupiter, but again with Mars, and really the most important thing is the strong aspect from Saturn, onto the Mars and specifically onto the Jupiter. It's a very tight opposition. So anyway, there's that issue that came. It's actually interesting too. Yogananda himself, he lived only until the age of 59. And at the age of 59, he was in his Rahu Ketu, Rahu Mahadasha and Ketu Bhukti. And again, he passed away during that time. I always think too that Rahu sometimes can bring on the energy of whatever sign it's in, of course. So again, we have Rahu ruled by Mars, and again, Mars is in the 8th house, again, but with Jupiter. And then Ketu is in Libra, ruled by Venus, and Venus again is in Scorpio. it's Digbala, but again, Venus in Scorpio is not a very happy sign. And sometimes, again, I have found with Rahu Ketu or Ketu Rahu that people sometimes will ascend or leave their body during that period, which is what occurred. Let me see what else. There was another factor I was going to say about his chart. Well, again, he just has a beautiful chart with the sun in Sagittarius, Leo rising, moon again. I always called Yogananda Mr. Magha because of that moon and ascendant in Magha Nakshatra, the 10th Nakshatra Magha, the mighty one, connected with the fixed star Regulus. When he was born, actually, the fixed star Regulus was on the eastern horizon, which if you've never looked at Regulus, it looks like a pulsating diamond. It's right in the heart of the lion. And so his ascendant was almost exactly on this fixed star Regulus, which again is the king, and he carried that, of course, that kingly energy. Let's go on to the next slide. When I've been doing work with clients, I found that there's different client styles that I have found very challenging. Probably one of the longest hours you'll spend sometimes with a client is a skeptic or a confounder, where they actually want to prove you wrong. So one of the things Chakrabarti said to me once was, if a client is abusive towards you or really negative towards you, even at the beginning of the session, within a few minutes, if that's still going on, his advice was to cut the session off. Give the person back their money. Don't allow yourself to be brutalized by a client. Let's go on to the next slide. This is the professional client. They will quite often come in and they've had, especially in Sedona, they'll have had their tarot cards read. They'll have had probably the manicurist here in town reads palms. And so they'll come in with that they've been to many, many astrologers. So I remember one client came into my office one day and she said, how much is it for a complete metaphysical? Anyway, it's a joke. Okay, moving on. The other client style that I find really, really challenging is the one that wants you to rescue them. And they feel like you're going to have the magic bullet, the divine, elixir that's going to solve all their problems. And again, usually with a client like this, at the end of the session, you may feel somewhat drained by the energy. So let's go on. This one client of mine in San Francisco, I'll tell the story. He was actually a psychologist that had just gotten a PhD, and he saw an ad in the paper and it said wanted zoo attendant. So he thought, wow, this is interesting. I'll go down and interview for the job. And the owner of the zoo said, well, it's not really, we don't really need fully attendant. What we need is you to get into this gorilla suit and pretend that you're a gorilla. Because what good is a zoo without a gorilla? And it's going to take us several months to get a new gorilla over here because our gorilla died. So we just want you to get into this suit and entertain people. So he jumps into the suit and runs out there and starts jumping around, and the kids are clapping. Everybody's happy to see the gorilla. And he's thinking to himself, maybe if I do a really good job, they'll decide to hire me full-time and I'll get as many bananas as I want. So anyway, he jumps on a tire, one of those swinging tires, and he's swinging higher and higher and higher until the rope snaps and he goes flying off. He lands into the lion's den. You can go on to the next slide, Sunil. We'll go on to, there we go. He lands right in the lion's den and he starts screaming. The gorilla starts screaming. The guy starts screaming, help, help, somebody help me. And the lion lunges at him and says, you better shut up or you're going to get us both fired. Okay. Anyway. Okay, moving on. This humor works better when I have a full audience. So sorry. The other challenging style that, again, can be really draining at the end of the session is the victim. where everything is someone else's fault, where they're not willing to take responsibility. And so I think, in a way, if we can help the client really take an active role in their healing process rather than being a passive victim of no cure. So again, we'll move on. Here's the victim. Now, this next style, the paranoid schizophrenia, is really, really challenging. And quite often, I mean, they do need to be on medication. I remember one client